Welcome everyone to the latest in a series of development and support webinars delivered by the NIHR Academy. My name is Lucy and I work at the NIHR Academy as the Senior Development and Support Manager. This webinar, Building a High Performing Team, is delivered in conjunction between the NIHR Academy and Capfinity, our leadership programme partners, and will be facilitated by Jane Kemp. Jane has extensive experience in coaching and leadership development and helps people to find positive solutions to make their working lives more successful. She's passionate about getting to the heart of an issue or challenge and enabling someone to see that within them they've got the power to change things. Jane, I'll now hand over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lucy. Welcome, everybody. It's lovely to be with you today. As Lucy said, my name is Jane Kemp, and I've been working as a coach, executive coach and facilitator for the last 15 years. I've been lucky enough to be working with NIHR on the Future Focused Leadership Programme for the last 4 or 5 years, which has been a real career highlight. I also work with teams across Europe and a bit further afield on how to become a high-performing team. And with each team, it is different. So what we're going to look at today are the ingredients for building that high-performing team. How do we do it? What do we need to do? We've got the chat box open, so I encourage you throughout to add any thoughts that you have throughout the session. There's quite a few of us on here, so I won't see all of them, but I'll try and pick out any things as we go through. But I encourage you to look at it, read, so that you've got the opportunity to learn from each other. There are a few moments throughout the webinar where I'll ask you to reflect on a team that you're in currently, one that you've been in the past, or one that you're moving to, and think about how that team works so that you can make the session relevant for you. So I'm going to get us started by thinking about what do we mean by a high-performing team. In terms of building a high-performing team is more than just a collection of individuals who are technically or subject matter experts, are brilliant in their field. We need something more than that. So high-performing teams we have to consciously build them. They take effort to build and to sustain. And so it's better to have a great team than a team of greats. And if you will entertain me for 30 seconds, I'm going to give you a sporting analogy. Paris Saint-Germain, the French football team, had the best team of greats. They had new Qatari owners who spent billions of pounds, but they could not hit the goals that they wanted. They weren't hitting the target of winning the Champions League or winning the domestic league until they had a change of coach in 2023. And their new coach was completely changed how they worked as a team. And the key things were collective responsibility, building trust, and collaboration. So they wanted to be more than a team of individual greats. And that's what we're going to look at today. It takes, effort, experience to build those high-performing teams. So what we're going to focus on is looking at the key ingredients to do that. Before we jump into that, though, I'd like you just to reflect on where's your team at the moment. And I appreciate that some of us might be across multiple teams. We might be in a clinical team, we might be in a research team, we might be across multiple teams. So choose a team that's relevant for you. And we've got 2 axes here. This comes from research conducted by Katzenbach, Bark and Smith. And they pulled out 2 key axes. The first along the horizontal is team effectiveness. So how well did the team work together to deliver? And then across the vertical axis, we've got performance. So the outcome. So how is the team performing in terms of delivering the results, in terms of quality, in terms of progress? What they then identified from their research is that there are different teams that tend to gather in different areas and they pulled out a high performance team curve. I'll show you that, but I'm just going to give you 20 seconds to think about where does your team sit across these axes? Where would you plot your team here? Okay, I'm going to show you what they found out in their research. So, in the research by Katzenbach and Smith, what they found is that we've got this high performance team curve. And what they found is that different teams tend to collect in different clusters. And we have the first team we have is the working group. So this is actually not a team. So there is no shared goal or there's no common purpose. There's no real benefit here to working as a team. So we might be getting the performance, but we're not actually effectively working as a team. We're a collection just of individuals. We then have the pseudo team. So, this group, we might believe we're a team, but actually, in reality, when you ask people, what are you working on? Why are you working on it? How do you work together? You realize that there's no shared goal, there's no shared accountability, and actually, accountability sits with the individuals. So, therefore, often maybe the team meetings, it might be quite superficial. Next up, we've got the potential teams. Now, this is often very common. So, there's the intent to work as a team, but we still need clarity. So, actually, we don't necessarily have that shared purpose, that shared accountability, and we're not quite sure who does what as yet. Next up, we've got the real teams. So, this is where we have that group with shared purpose, really clear goals, and a common approach to work. So, we have complementary skills and we hold each other mutually accountable. So, that's a real team. Then we have those high performing teams, and these are rare. There are, we've if you reflect on the teams we've been in, we've probably been in teams that feature in all of these different categories. But in high performing teams, often the difference is we've got all the characteristics that feature in the real team and a deep commitment to each other's growth, development, and delivering as a team. So if I was to ask you now, where that team that you were thinking about on the previous slide here, where would you put that team? And as I said, you can write it in the chat box, but you can also just reflect. There's no need to share if you don't want to. So where would you put your team currently? And I think it's interesting as well to reflect when we're in multiple teams. It might be that actually my clinical team performs as a real team, but actually the new team I'm in the university, do you know what? We're in the potential team. I know there's some teams that I'm in, which is very much a working group. We don't have shared goals, accountability, and then there are others which are up there in that high performing. Thank you, James, getting us kicked off somewhere between potential and real. Okay, let's look at what we can do to try and move our teams up to that high performing team. So, research has been conducted looking at those high performing teams and what do they have in common. So, in high performing teams, they don't move up that curve by accident. They have trust, awareness, and safe conflict. So, we've called them our T's and C's. These three conditions consistently show up in those high performing teams. So, they, in order to have things like the awareness and the safe conflict, we need the trust first. So they're all interlinked, but we do first need to establish that trust because without the trust, the conflict might be very, very difficult. But actually, if I have that foundation of trust and if I have that foundation of awareness and understanding what drives me, but also what drives other members of the team, it can help us with that safe conflict. And thank you. We've got some great comments in the chat box. I work in multiple teams. One is new, so it's got potential. Others established, so it's a real team. Okay, but then another might be more of a pseudo team. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. We're going to look through these three elements in turn. So let's start off with trust. Trust is a really difficult one. When I'm working with teams, we talk about building trust, and people often say, I only know when the trust isn't there. I don't know what to do. I don't know how we build it. It can be something that feels quite nebulous to try and tie down exactly what trust is in a team. So we're going to look at it through the lens of psychological safety. So that's what we're going to explore because that's often what actually we explore, what we experience as a team. So I don't necessarily experience, or I can't necessarily name what trust is, but I can explore some of those things in terms of the psychological safety. And if you want to know any more about psychological safety, I would highly recommend the work by Amy Edmondson. So she's a Novartis professor who's done extensive research looking at what psychological safety in the workplace means. And she's worked with Professor Michael West looking at psychological safety across the NHS and what that looks like and what it leads to. And so if we use the lens of psychological safety when thinking about trust, we can look at these four areas that we've got on screen. And I'm going to ask you to think about the team that you're thinking about. And I appreciate for some of you, that's going to take a while because you've got multiple teams. But I would like you to think about for each of these 8 questions, would you, thinking about your team, would you strongly agree? Do you feel neutral? Would you strongly disagree? So just take a few minutes and think about it for your team. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes just to go through those 8 questions. Yes, sorry, it's Amy Edmondson. I'll write it in the chat box while you're looking at these questions. Brilliant. Thank you, Charlotte, starting us off. So I agree with a lot of the questions, but there are some that I don't. And I think for lots of us, it will depend on the team that we're in. It will also depend on the situation. But what we will notice is that every team is different. For some teams, we are strong in some areas, but we might have other areas where we're weaker. And what ideally we'd like to do is try and build the trust in each of these areas. And so I'm going to look at them in a little bit more detail. And there's a brilliant point in there as well. I would agree with these things, but I'm not sure every person in my team would feel similarly. And so, therefore, I think if we're thinking about our team, if we have people in our team who don't feel like this, the psychological safety and the trust is different for different people. And I will work with teams where 8 out of 10 have said hi on all of these and 2 people haven't. And as a manager and a leader, I think, the onus is on us to ask what's the difference? What are they experiencing that I'm not experiencing? What are they seeing that feels different? Because there's something going on there which impacts the trust and the ability to be at that high performing team level if it's different for some people. So I think it's a great set of questions to ask when working with a team. Lovely. So let's explore them in a bit more detail. So they broadly pull out into 4 key areas, and there are 4 types of psychological safety, and this work comes from Amy Edmondson, but also somebody called Timothy Clark, who wrote The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety in 2020. And he talks about the 4 areas. The first is inclusion. I trust that I belong here. So I feel safe. I'm not being excluded. And there are little things we can do that help to build that inclusion. So we need the inclusion first for us to be able to build on that next part, which is that learner safety. I trust it's okay for me to be learning, for me to be growing, for me not to be perfect, which means I can ask questions without fear of consequences. It means that I'm able to learn, I'm able to make small mistakes, and I'm able to ask for help. But I need to feel included first to be able to feel that I can learn. Once I feel included, once I'm learning, I can then trust that my ideas are going to be valued. So then I can contribute. I can suggest things in team meetings. I can present a different point of view. But I trust that my skills and my strengths are going to be valued by my team. Once we've got those three, we can then build on challenge. So actually, I trust that in this group, it's okay for me to disagree. It's okay for me to bring up problems. It's okay for me to bring up concerns. It's okay for me to challenge. So they all four are necessary for building that psychological safety, but you'll notice that we're stronger in some areas than in other areas. And that's which book and author is this from? Sorry, this is from Timothy Clark, 2020, and it's the 4 stages of psychological safety. Thanks, Al, for the question. Okay, so what you'll notice is that in different teams, we're stronger and weaker in other areas, and that's normal. It's normal. But if you look, each of these are numbered. So we start at the bottom with building that inclusion. We look to then create that environment where people feel safe to learn, able to contribute, and then also able to challenge. What I'd love you to write in the chat box is, where do you think your team is very strong? Where do you think if there was one of these areas and you can pick the number 1, 2, 3, and 4, where do you think your team is very strong? 2. So we've got learner. Okay, so it's safe to be imperfect and also contributor. So I trust that my ideas are going to be valued. Oh, we've got a beautiful spread, which is great because I'm going to ask you to be sharing some tips about how we do these. So I'm going to be asking you to share your experience because we have almost 200 of us here today. So I would like you to share your experience as we go through. So in order to build these and to build on these 4 areas, it isn't about enormous sort of gestures. It is about little practical ways that we can build these. For example, anybody who had strength in terms of building inclusion, what is a small practical way? Write any thoughts in the chat box that we can demonstrate inclusion. How, as a leader, can you role model that and demonstrate that? Just write it into the chat box. What do you do? What are the things that we can do? James, thank you. Good introduction, an introduction for new members. Fantastic. So people feel valued in rather than just sneaking into the team and no one mentioning them. Actually, here's so and so. It might be small things. It could be including our pronouns in our email sign off. It could be involving in decision making. Thank you. Accommodating different people's needs. Love it. Saying thank you and meaning it, ensuring that everyone has a voice and is encouraged to participate, not just the loudest person. Absolutely. So notice where the contributions are coming from. How do I make sure that everybody's getting an opportunity to contribute? How about learner safety? What's a little thing that you do with your team? Lots of you put 2 in as a strength in your teams. How do you build that learner safety? And Leah, thank you. Understanding people's preferred ways of working. Yeah. Great example there. Ask others for help to show it's okay. Yeah, I don't understand how to do this, or I've got a question about this. Anybody got any thoughts? Be honest about my own challenges to role model that it's okay. Highlight junior staff contribution. Brilliant. Just little things. This isn't about huge gestures. This is about consistently using small gestures to build that trust and to build that safety, and no blame culture. I love it as well. No question is a stupid question. So that builds into that contributor. I trust that my ideas will be valued as well. How do you do this? How do you demonstrate that it is Uh, what are the little things you do to demonstrate it's okay to contribute? And manner, and again, these are all great examples. Can this be captured and shared? I completely agree with you. Thank you everyone for using the chat box because you're generating some fantastic examples. Be approachable, culture of asking for help and being okay. My final question then on this one is how do you create that environment where it's safe to challenge? And we'll look at this in more detail, but what are little gestures that you do? And Martin puts a great point in the chat box, celebrating when things go right and learning when things go wrong. A while ago, I was working with a senior team at a cybersecurity company. And at 4:45 every day, all of the technical experts came together to celebrate the near misses. The idea being that if one person had nearly taken down Lloyds Bank's cybersecurity system, everybody could learn from it. So instead of it being we don't talk about our mistakes, it was celebrated and it was an opportunity for everybody to learn. Thank you. And what have we got? Ask for others' perspectives and pros and cons and genuinely listen and take on board those different suggestions and perspectives. Wonderful. Feel free to disagree with me, thank you, or challenge this approach. So we're going to look at these, particularly that safe conflict. We'll look at that in a bit more detail. But there are little things that we can do, and I'd highly recommend, as we said, noting down the things, the areas where you said that your team wasn't so strong. What are the little things that we can role model? What are the little things that we can encourage to build that psychological safety? And we will notice with different teams, we're strong in different areas. But if we can be aware of the area where we're weaker, we can look to those little micro behaviors to try and build that trust. So we can call it the click model to build that psychological safety. But in order to do this, we also need to have that awareness about how does my behavior impact my team? How do other people's behavior impact the team? So let's just look at that. Let's look at building that awareness to start off with. So when we're thinking about things like role modeling that psychological safety, it's worth thinking about having that awareness about how do I come across? What am I role modeling? So I'm just going to give you a minute, 30 seconds to a minute to answer these 4 questions for yourself. So just go through these 4 questions and answer them for you. Okay, what this should highlight, if everybody was now to share, and we had 200 people sharing their different I am best at, I like to celebrate success, what it would highlight is that we're all very different. And for us to be at our best looks different, and we need different conditions for it. But what can sometimes happen is, as a leader, we're unaware of how much of an impact we have on how things are shaped. So our preferences will often shape what happens in the team without us even realizing it. So that's why in those high performing teams, we need trust, but we also need awareness. And the awareness is twofold awareness, one, of me and how I impact the team, but also awareness and understanding of the rest of the team. So our preferences, understanding my preferences, but also understanding for my team, when are they likely to be at their best? So let's explore the impact that these preferences can potentially have. So we'll take that first one. So the last one. We'll take that last one. So a pet peeve of mine. For example, if a pet peeve of mine was lateness, the behaviour could be that I can be really harsh on those who are time poor. If somebody doesn't have the time because they're also working on another paper with somebody else and they're also in clinic 3 days a week, I could actually be quite harsh potentially on that person because I think lateness is a real bugbear of mine. So we then need to look at what's the impact this could have. So this could have a negative impact because it creates that culture where time management is valued over understanding, over listening. Maybe I've already got that negativity bias before they've then delivered the fantastic work. So I've already caught them off guard. So it's worth thinking sometimes about our preferences or our strengths. What behaviour does that lead to? What's potentially the impact of it? So we need to raise that awareness not just for ourselves, but also how does that impact other people in different situations? So let's explore that. Let's take another example there. For example, I'm at my best in the mornings. So if I'm at my best in the mornings, I'm going to schedule those specific tasks at that time. So because I'm at my best, that's actually my best time to focus. So I want to get my head down, I want to get my writing done, or I want to be analysing the research at that time. However, there's somebody else in my team, they're stuck. And the best time for them to have those questions answered is in the morning. But because of my preferences, I've not created that team or that environment where that's possible. So it might be that people feel that not everyone's needs are equal and we're not getting the best from others who are different. Uh, let's take the final couple. So when I feel stressed, I like to talk it out. The behaviour, therefore, is I might get distracted or I talk too openly about issues, the impact on others could be that I push my overwhelm onto them. I feel better because I've talked about it, and that's what works for me. For the rest of my team, they might potentially feel overwhelmed. It's been too much. I like to celebrate success quietly or privately, but as a result, maybe I don't externalize praise for my team. And actually, there's people in my team that external praise and external validation is really important. So it could have a negative impact. I think you could also, for that last one, think about feedback. You know, I like to receive feedback infrequently. Therefore, potentially the behaviour is I often don't give feedback to other people. The impact could be if somebody's learning a new skill, they're not getting the regular feedback that they're needing. So I think this is quite a useful tool to use to reflect on our own patterns, maybe reflect as a team as well on what are our preferences, therefore what's potentially the impact, particularly if we notice that friction has shown up, if we notice that there's some friction or some conflict that doesn't seem to be moving on. Take the time to reflect on, well, what are the behaviours? How am I prioritising, for example, my time? And is that working for the rest of the team? So I know if we take, for example, I'm at my if I take an example, I am quite last minute in my preparation, and it really works for me. It doesn't work when I'm working with some people, and I've become very aware of that. So actually, my leaving things till the last minute can have a really negative impact on the team, and it has a negative impact on team performance. So therefore, having had the conversations with different people I work with in different teams, because I work across multiple teams. Actually, for some people, it's really important that we have the meeting 2 weeks beforehand. It's then really important that we just change it and we flex it depending on the way that works for that team, not just for me as the leader of that team. So let's just look at as well how we can build on this, how we can build on this awareness. So what can we do to do things differently? Two key things is avoiding assumptions. There are multiple different approaches to do things. Just because I like to do things first thing in the morning doesn't mean everybody does. There isn't one right and one wrong. So what we want to do is communicate our preferences. If I don't know what my team's preferences are, I can ask them. So make them visible. If I'm doing it in a particular way, maybe share why it is that I'm doing it in that particular way. The second thing we can do is try different solutions. So not everything is going to be perfect, but where can we compromise? Where can we work it? So maybe we rotate it. So one week we'll do, okay, the meeting will be first thing. For the second week, for those who've got caring responsibilities, for those who've got drop-offs that they need to do, or for those who've got a clinic at a certain time, we can rotate it for the second week. I worked with a team who were based in the UK, but they had various different team members spread across the globe. And there was one team member who was based in Australia, and the weekly meeting was at 9 a.m. UK time, which was 9 p.m. her time, and then people would often be late. And it set up a really bad. She said she didn't feel like an equal valued member of the team because it was always in her night time. So actually, as a team, what they did is they did exactly that. They rotated it because actually, how can we make this so that everybody feels involved? And by having that conversation about it, they were able to say, actually, by being 10 minutes late UK time, that's not so bad. But actually, 10 minutes late when I'm based in Sydney, it's not so good. We're eating into my bedtime. So, communication is key. So, if we're rotating those different solutions, try them, see what works, review it, adjust it, try it the different ways to see how it's working for different people. So, even when we've got that trust and awareness, there can sometimes be that tension. So, there can still sometimes be that tension that arises. And we're going to come on to look at that. We're going to look at the conflict in high performing teams. So, as we saw, we've got trust, awareness, and then the final one in our terms and conditions was safe conflict. And we've got this Thomas and Kilmann conflict model from 1974, so a while ago. But I'm going to ask you to have a think about potentially how you might respond in conflict. So we've got our two axes here. So on a horizontal axis, we've got cooperativeness. So this is the degree to which we are driven by trying to satisfy the other party's concerns. So how much am I trying to, in this discussion, cooperate and satisfy your concerns, your questions, your challenges? And then on the vertical axis, we have assertiveness. So this is the degree to which I'm trying to satisfy my own concerns. And so during this conflict and conversation, am I most motivated by getting my point across and getting a win for me? So what you'll see we have is and I'll build on this model as we go through. So I just want you to reflect on where do you think you are? So top left, we've got high assertive, low cooperative. Top right, high assertive and high cooperative. Bottom right, low assertive, high cooperative. And bottom left, low assertive, low cooperative. And just have a think. Think about you, your typical conflict style. And we're going to explore that in a bit more detail. And let's explore what each of them mean and how do we build safe conflict. So if we were to look at it in a bit more detail, let's take the bottom left. So this is avoiding. So this is where we might be, when conflict arises, we're either going to step back or stay silent. So we are not engaging. And this blocks a team from becoming high performing because you don't have that individual's contribution. And it might keep things calm for now, but those challenges that I didn't raise or that you didn't raise may well resurface later. And then bottom right, we've got accommodating. So this is where I'm putting others' needs first and I'm downplaying my own. So again, this can block a team from becoming high performing because you don't have my input, you don't have my experience, you don't have my challenge. So it can preserve the relationship, but it prevents that honest discussion. And then in the middle, we've got compromising. So this is where we're going to meet in the middle. And while this might in the short term seem good because we've avoided any potential conflict, what it means is that actually practically we haven't got the best outcome because we haven't challenged, we haven't pushed back, I haven't necessarily heard your points of view. We've reached that sort of middle ground. In the top left, we've got competing. So this is where I'm driven more by assertiveness than cooperativeness. So I've pushed my view strongly because I'm motivated to win the argument. There might be multiple reasons why I might feel that my point of view is the right one, or it's the best one for the clinical outcomes that we need. But it can stop us from being high performing because it might shut down difference. It might shut down challenge because I'm pushing my point of view. In the top right-hand corner, we've got collaborating. So this is where both parties are asserting their needs, but they're also being highly cooperative. So in order to do that, I need to share my points of view, but I need to listen. And this is what we mean by that safe conflict, because we're supporting high-performing teams here by sharing the different views, discussing it, debating it, going through it to reach those better outcomes. So let's look at how do we create that safe conflict. So arguably in one of these, so if it's just competing, we might have conflict, but it might be more of a toxic conflict. So it's me pushing my view on you. You don't necessarily feel listened to. You don't necessarily feel safe to challenge. So if we go back to that safe psychological safety, I'm potentially undermining it. So that might create more of a toxic kind of conflict. In terms of the compromising, accommodating, or avoiding, there isn't any conflict. So it's not safe conflict, we've avoided the conflict. So that top right-hand corner, that collaboration, is where we can deal with any of those issues that are coming up. We can challenge them, we can discuss them. And in order to do that, let's look at two conditions that help us to do that. So to practice this, we need to create a space where challenge is welcome but respectful. And you've mentioned already in the chat box some things that help to do that. So creating that space where it's welcome but it's respectful, then also take that big picture approach. What's going on in this disagreement? What is going on in this conflict? So sorry, just a quick question, but it's on the Thomas and Kilman conflict model, 1974. So it's just on the bottom right-hand side of your screen there, where that comes from. Okay, so let's look at how do we do this, how to practice and build that safe conflict. And you have already mentioned, as I said, several things that we can do. So let's start with the creating a space where it's welcome but respectful. When we can role model, as we said, it's about those, when we talked about psychological safety, we talked about those small behaviors. When somebody challenges, I can positively acknowledge it. So, really interesting point of view. Tell me more. Thanks for raising that. It's great to see it from a different angle. I really appreciate you challenging that assumption. Tell me more. So we're signalling and demonstrating to the whole team that it's not only allowed, but it's valued. So I'm not only encouraging it, I'm listening to it when you give it to me. So when you then challenge something, when you counter something, I'm positively acknowledging it. I once heard years ago when I started doing this job and working with large teams and went on a week-long training course. And we had somebody who said, use a tactic from improvisation comedy, which is instead of saying no, but, which shuts down the conversation, they said, use yes, and. And I think it's a really nice way here as well of positively acknowledging challenge. So yes, I'm welcoming the challenge and I'd like you to tell me more. If you think about it from an improv point of view, if you use no, it's shutting down that other person. So I'd encourage a yes and for trying to acknowledge and encourage that challenge. So recognizing it. The second thing we can do is Model respective curiosity, so rather than defensiveness. So when we want to create that environment where challenge is welcome but respectful, we set the tone. We set the tone. As we talked about in awareness, if my tone when you challenge or suggest something different to my point of view is being defensive and pushing back, then I'm not going to be modeling that curiosity. I'm not going to be suggesting that your point of view is valid, is valued and valuable. So focus on the idea rather than attacking or defending. Think about, okay, tell me more. What could we be missing? How might we be able to proceed with both approaches? Let's look at how we can do this. And let's look at one final way to do this. So, this is I think this is a really crucial one as well, is provide multiple ways for people to challenge. Some of us feel very comfortable challenging in a large group setting or in a team meeting. Others don't. That doesn't mean we don't have challenges. It means we don't necessarily feel comfortable doing it in that way. And hopefully, as we build the psychological safety and we build the awareness, we'll learn how different people want to challenge. But it might be that we, rather than it just being in team meetings, we set up one-to-ones as well. We enable people to anonymously question things. So I will often work with teams, set up a box at the front of the room, put all your questions in there. They're anonymous. Another technique I do, people will write when we're face to face, write a question, scrumple it up, throw it into the room, somebody else pick it out so that they become anonymous. The other thing you can do when you're online like this, you can say send the question directly to the host, to the facilitator, and then it can become anonymous. But it's just trying to create that environment where everybody feels able to participate and everybody feels able to challenge in a way that they feel comfortable with. So we're going to explore just one final thing when we're thinking about conflict before we move on to Q&A. And I can see some great questions have been coming up as we've been going through. So we will explore as many of those as we can. But we're just going to look at one final thing. So often when we're thinking about conflict, we're looking at what's on the surface. So we see, if we think about it like a conflict iceberg, we see that tiny bit that's above the waterline. And so that might be the sort of behaviour, or why is that person being very defensive, or they're consistently missing the deadlines, or they seem disengaged. And that's what we see above, but actually what's going on underneath? And in order to be in that high performing team, we need to understand what are the things happening below the waterline that are driving that behaviour that I'm seeing. So above the waterline, what we might see, for example, are the systemic issues. So this might be, confusion on priorities, or somebody repeatedly sort of handling something, or repeatedly missing the deadlines. It might be tone and personalities, which could be, well, that's not my job, or somebody responding very sort of abruptly, or might be late in terms of in my delivery. Behaviours in meetings, what we might see is that somebody's always interrupting, talking over, dominating the conversation, or at the opposite end, completely disengaging. The final thing here we might have on the surface is patterns of collaboration. We might notice that people will only collaborate with certain people, maybe avoiding the conversations with others. Maybe they're always coming to us and defer to us rather than going direct. But what we need to look at is what's happening underneath the surface that is leading to that. So what are the emotions? The emotions could be I'm overwhelmed, I'm under pressure, I'm trying to complete my PhD and I need to be doing this, and I've got childcare commitments as well at the moment. So all of these things are happening. It might be that individual's interests, needs, desires. Maybe they want more ownership. Maybe they need a different project. Maybe what else is happening for them? Or hidden expectations. I'd thought that maybe somebody always thought that things should be perfect before handing it in or before submitting it for review. Somebody else thought 50% was fine. So there's different expectations. Equally, what can be going on underneath the surface is unresolved past issues. Maybe there's been tensions in different people in the team before that haven't. We've just avoided it. We've left it there in that conflict handling model. We've avoided it or we've accommodated, but we're still carrying it with us. The final one here is our values or our beliefs. So actually, maybe there is we have a belief that conflict is a negative, so therefore that's what we're avoiding. And I think it's crucial as leaders is to try and understand what's going on but beneath the conflict. So being curious about, well, what's happening? What are the things that are happening below the surface? And bringing us back to what is our shared purpose? What are we trying to achieve together as a team? How can we move forward? But often we're just thinking about above the waterline and not what's happening underneath. So just to summarize where we've been to so far. So the T's and C's model, so trust, building through psychological safety, building that trust through those small, consistent behaviors. You had some brilliant ones in the chat box, the little things that we can do to build. It's not necessarily the big gestures. And then building our awareness of our preferences, but also what's the impact of my preferences on other people, but also building awareness of what are the strengths of my team. What are they? And then integrate those behaviors, those preferences, those strengths into our team's collective way of working. And then the final one is safe conflict. So rather encouraging that challenge, encouraging an environment where we can debate, we can have difference of opinion and role modeling that so that we reach those better decisions collectively as a team. So give it a go. In terms of trust, share openly with others when we're unsure or when we've got it wrong or when we're still figuring it out. In terms of building that awareness, everyone, adapt our ways of working, have those conversations with others. So encourage people to share their working preferences. I'm at my best at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or I like working in silence, or actually I work best when I've had a meeting to start off with. Encourage people to share and then adapt it. And then in terms of the safe conflict, invite that challenge. What am I missing? Is there a different way of looking at this? How could we explore that? So just role modeling that, building that safe conflict. I've mentioned a few resources as we've gone through. If anything wasn't clear, please do let me know and I will add it into the chat box. But we've also got these further 4 resources that once you completed the feedback, if you share your email address, you'll be sent the handout. And in the handout, you'll have all of these references as well. Okay, and I'm going to stop sharing now and bring Lucy back in so we can have Q&A.
Hiya, Jane. Thank you so much for delivering an informative session for us today. So as Jane said, we will now open up the Q&A. There's still time to send in your questions. We've got quite a lot already and 10 minutes to get through as many as possible. You can upvote ones that you want to most hear answered as well in the Q&A box as well by clicking on the thumb icon. So I will not delay any further and we'll get across to the questions. Let's see what's most upvoted in here at the moment. Wonderful. So the first question with the most upvotes, Jane, is around psychological safety. And it's just looking at how we can measure the psychological safety of our teams, if you've got any thoughts around that.
Yeah, so I think in the links that I have put into that we just saw on that previous slide, which will be shared in the handout, the second one, the article by Amy Edmondson, she has a link in there to a psychological safety questionnaire, but it is basically asking the 8 questions that appeared in that slide, and you get your teams to rate it. And when I work with teams and we are working on a high-performing team exercise, the first thing that we ask the teams to do is anonymously complete that. So everyone anonymously completes it and then all the results are collated. And what's fascinating is where there's difference. Because actually it's really interesting when you go, oh, the majority of us have given us a 4 out of 5, where 5 is couldn't be stronger. But actually somebody's put 2. And that response is just as valid because it's kind of understanding what's happening for that person. But I would highly recommend if you click on that link, it will give you the questionnaire that Amy Edmondson uses, which is so it's got the 8 questions there.
Fab, thank you, Jane. So a really useful resource for everybody to tap into, which is great. Next question, also around psychological safety, is just around buy-in to the concept. So how can I help my team to buy into the concept of psychological safety?
I think that's a really interesting one because when we're moving into a team or when we're in a great team, we don't go, oh, this is great because it's a really psychologically safe team. But what we might say is actually, in the team I'm in, my leader really encourages challenge. Everybody is included, everybody has a voice, and everybody is able to be heard. So I think how we encourage buy-in to it is by noticing the behaviors. What's the benefit of it? So linking it to the things that your team cares about. You know, we care about the fact that everybody has a voice. We care about the fact that we can be innovative. We care about the fact that we can come up with the best possible outcomes for our patients in research. So therefore, if we've got a psychologically safe team, that's what enables us to do it. So I think we link it to the outcomes because actually trust, psychological safety, they're difficult to touch, they're difficult to see.
Thank you, that's great. I'll move on to the next question, Jane. What can I do to encourage my team to speak up and counterpoint rather than just agree with me?
This is a great question because often we do it, particularly when we're time poor. We've run a meeting, everyone's agreed, and we think, great. But we will often know that that isn't genuine agreement. And that's everyone just sort of quietly thinking, oh, it's easier for me not to speak up, or maybe there isn't that psychological safety. I would, we've used some of these examples already, role model it, demonstrate that it is okay to disagree, or say, we've come up with that decision really quickly. I'd like us to play devil's advocate here. Let's challenge it. If that's not right, what could be right instead? I know when I'm working with teams, often there will be people in teams who will not speak up, who don't want to speak up and don't feel comfortable speaking up in the large group. So I'll break people out into pairs and say, I'd like each pair to come up with a challenge to this. We've come up with this really quickly, or everyone seems to be on board. Let's come up with, each team come up with one challenge or one counterpoint, for example. And giving people different ways of contributing, whether that's use post-it notes, use a chat box, use different ways to contribute.
Thank you. That's great, Jane. The next upvoted question, I guess it taps into this a little bit, but it's exploration of actually sometimes it's not always possible to make decisions collaboratively as a team or include all opinions and suggestions. So I guess about expectation management and how we can lead effectively when sometimes we actually might need to be more assertive around decisions. Do you have any thoughts around that?
That's a brilliant question because I think it's really important to be clear on, is this a collaboration? Is this a consultation? Or is this we talk, I decide? So, and actually, I think when it goes wrong is when we've set it up as a collaboration and it's not. So, an example I use when talking about this is local councils. Local authorities will send out a message to everyone saying, we want to find out about parking or bins in your area. And you think, oh, great, I can get my views across. Very importantly, it is a consultation, not a collaboration. A consultation is we talk, I decide. And there are times when we absolutely need a consultation. A collaboration is we talk, we decide. Not every situation is a collaboration situation. And some of them, where we need a really quick decision, there's a health and safety risk, is not going to be a collaboration situation. But the problem is, I think, where we come unstuck is where we haven't set that up at the start. So if it's a consultation, great, tell me. Right, I need your opinions on this. I'm getting 5 people's, I'm collating it, then I'm deciding. If it's a collaboration, fine, but let me know and make sure that we're all involved and it is a collaboration.
Thanks, Jane. That's really, really helpful. We will swiftly move on. So we've got a question here around how can I understand the collective strengths and preferences of my team? I think this was maybe somewhat covered in the tool that you mentioned earlier, but it'd be great to dig into that in a bit more detail if you've got any thoughts, Jane.
I think, yeah, I think on one of the slides we said don't make assumptions. So it's really easy to see the world through our lens. So my preferences, they make sense to me. I've been doing them for decades. So I might assume they're everyone's. I think the way we find out, we ask the question, don't we? When are you at your best? How do you like to work? We've got a new team member. How do you want to work together with me as the leader of the team? How do you want to work together with the rest of the team? But I think it's also important to think about, as we saw in that model, the preferences. Therefore, what are the behaviours that come from it? What's the impact of it? And so it isn't just understanding the preferences. It's therefore what are the behaviours and then adapting it. It's not going to be perfect for everybody all the time, but how do we adapt it and it feel like my preferences have been accommodated?
Thanks, Jane. That's really, really useful. Next question we have here. It's an interesting one, actually. So thinking about how to build a high performing team when actually you might have some people who work full time on that project or team and others who might only work a small percentage of their time. So looking at the kind of effectiveness of that team when actually delegation of responsibilities might look different, or the kind of makeup of the team in terms of how it operates might not just be a full team that work together all the time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And I guess there's going to be different ways of working that suit some people. But I guess it's also looking at I think if we go back to when we looked at the research, the Katzenbach and Smith research on different teams, if we're leading towards that high performing team, what we really needed was, which was the difference between the real team and high performing team, was that understanding of each other, an understanding of different people's goals. So if you're only in for 2 days a week or for 1 day a week, do we still have a shared goal and a shared understanding and a shared purpose? Do we still have shared accountability? And I can still be equally accountable for you, to you, and for our shared goals 3 hours a week as I can be if I'm doing it 5 days a week. But there probably needs to be that mutual understanding rather than just, oh, Jane's never in because she's doing that other thing she does. Do you understand what that other thing is that I do? Is that because it's important to me? And so, therefore, if we've got that shared mutual understanding, it's actually, I guess, taking the time to understand for those other 4 days a week, what is that other person doing that matters to them?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. I think we'll have time for one more question. We've got lots coming through. It's a shame we've not been able to cover everything, but hopefully we've covered lots of ground today, which has been useful for everybody. So I'll just cover one more question with you, Jane, and then we'll wrap up the session. So we've got a question here. It's just around what happens when there are two managers with two different styles or preferences. How do we work together? Yeah.
Oh, that's a challenge. I'd be a billionaire if I knew the answer to that one. It's a real challenge. And I guess, again, so it depends. I think in that situation, it depends how those managers are working together. I mean, obviously, initially, you need to have a conversation about, as managers, about how you work together. What is your shared goal and shared objective? You probably need to look at things like the iceberg. Because actually, if you look at the iceberg, what I might see on the surface is that other manager is being difficult, that other manager is being obstructive. Actually, they're behaving in a way that makes complete sense to them. They're behaving in a way that's going to meet their objectives. Do I understand their objectives? So there probably needs to be that initial understanding of what are they doing, how are they working, but also having that open conversation and trying to build that safe conflict in terms of that collaboration.
Thank you, Jane. Well, thanks so much for delivering such a great session for us today. And I hope that everybody who's joined us has found it beneficial and feels able to take away some of the behaviours and implement them in their roles and their day to day.